Have you ever reached the end of another year and realized not much has actually changed? Do you keep telling yourself, next month will be different, only to find yourself making exactly the same choices you've always made? Or perhaps you've quietly asked yourself, am I actually creating my future, or am I simply repeating my past? If any of those questions resonate with you, stay with me, because today's masterclass may explain far more than you expect. Because by the end of this lesson, you'll understand why lasting transformation really comes from one dramatic decision. Instead, it comes from hundreds of small decisions made quietly, repeated consistently, until they eventually shape who you become. Because the life you're living today isn't usually the result of one big moment. It's the result of thousands of ordinary moments, repeated over time. And once you understand that, you'll begin to see your future very differently. Hello and welcome back to John Williams' Global Masterclass series, a series designed to help you think differently, live intentionally, and create lasting success from the inside out. I'm genuinely grateful you've chosen to spend these next few minutes with me, because every lesson in this series builds upon the last. And today's lesson may be one of the most practical we've explored so far. In our last masterclass video, we looked at something that most people never stop to question: the thoughts that guide much of our lives, the beliefs we hold, the expectations we carry. Many of them weren't consciously chosen. They were picked up over years through family, school, friends, culture, and life experiences. We discovered that much of what drives our behavior today was programmed long before we even realized it. But that naturally leads to another question. If we now understand that, why do so many people continue getting the same results year after year? Why doesn't understanding automatically create change? And that's exactly what we're going to explore today. I'd like to tell you something I discovered many years ago. People often look at my life and see several completely different careers. Growing up in Liverpool, becoming a professional musician while I was still a teenager, moving to America later in my life, working in real estate, property management, and in personal development and teaching. You know, from the outside, it almost looks as though I kept reinventing myself. In a way, I suppose I have. People sometimes say, John, you've lived several different lives. But that's not really how it felt. Looking back, the biggest turning points in my life didn't happen because one morning I woke up and made one huge life-changing decision. They happened because I slowly began making different decisions every single day. As a musician, for instance, I always tried to work with other musicians that were far better than me. That way I'd always be learning and taking my game to a higher level. Later, when I changed careers, I filled my car with educational cassettes instead of listening to whatever happened to be on the radio. I deliberately spent time around people whose thinking challenged mine, and I became willing to ask questions when I didn't know the answers. I invested in seminars, I invested in books. More importantly, I invested in myself in both time and money. Money that I really didn't have much of at the beginning at that time. None of those decisions felt extraordinary. In fact, most of them felt incredibly ordinary, and some a little scary. There was no fanfare, no dramatic breakthrough, no lightning bolt. Just one small decision, followed by another, then another. However, each one was a little scary because I now realize I was stepping out of my comfort zone. It reminds me of something I didn't fully understand when I was younger. When I became a professional musician, people would often say, "Oh, you're lucky." They saw the performance, they heard the music, but they never saw the hours upon hours of practice, the rehearsals, loading equipment into vans all the time, driving hundreds of miles to perform, and learning songs late into the night. They celebrated what happened on stage without ever seeing what happened long before anyone was watching. Years later, the same thing happened again when I moved into real estate here in America and progressed from salesman to vice president of sales and marketing in a relatively short period of time, then running one of the largest property management companies in Florida at that time. People once again called it luck. But once again, they were only seeing the results. They didn't see the books I was reading, the personal development seminars I attended, the mentors I sought out. The mornings I chose learning over comfort, evenings I chose growth over entertainment. Life has taught me something incredibly simple. People celebrate what happens in public, but But your future is almost always created by what happens in private. Those quiet moments when nobody is applauding, nobody is watching, nobody even knows what you're doing, or even cares for that matter. Those are the moments that quietly build tomorrow. And perhaps that's why so many people underestimate them. Because small decisions rarely feel important until enough of them have accumulated to completely change the direction of your life. Most people believe life changes because of huge moments like winning the lottery, landing the perfect job, meeting the right person, receiving a promotion. Those moments certainly change circumstances, but they rarely change the direction of a life all by themselves. Direction changes because habits change, and habits begin with decisions. Think of an aeroplane leaving London for New York, say. If the pilot changes the course by just 2 or 3 degrees, the passengers won't notice, the drinks are still being served, the conversations continue, everything appears exactly the same. But several hours later, that aircraft lands in an entirely different place. In my experience, life works much the same way. Tiny daily decisions repeated often enough create completely different destinations. The problem is, small decisions don't usually feel important. Skipping one workout doesn't seem to matter. Buying one unnecessary item doesn't seem to matter. Putting off the one difficult conversation doesn't seem to matter. Choosing to scroll on your phone instead of reading a chapter of a good book doesn't seem to matter. Not today. But life isn't built in a day. It's built one day at a time. Those little choices quietly become routines. Those routines become habits. And those habits shape your character. And eventually your character determines the quality of your life. I'd like you to imagine something. Picture a large bucket sitting beneath a tap. Now imagine that tiny drop of water just falls into the bucket. Nothing appears to happen. Another drop. Still nothing. 10 drops. 100 drops. You'll probably walk past and think, well, this isn't making any difference. But leave that tap running long enough, and eventually, without any dramatic moment, the bucket overflows. Success works exactly the same way. Knowledge compounds, confidence compounds, discipline compounds, relationships compound, trust compounds, even disappointment compounds. Everything grows whether it's helping you or holding you back. The question isn't whether your decisions are creating results. They are. The real question is, what kind of results are they creating? I have to tell you that I believe one of the biggest misconceptions in personal development is believing that motivation changes lives. It doesn't. Motivation gets you started, but consistently changes lives. There are days you won't feel inspired. There's days you won't feel confident. Days when absolutely nothing seems to be happening. Those are usually the days that matter the most, because every time you keep a promise to yourself, you strengthen the image you have of yourself. Every time you quit, you strengthen that image as well. Most people don't realize this. Every decision you make is a casting vote. You're voting for the person you're becoming. When you choose to learn, you're voting to become someone who grows. When you choose to exercise, you're voting for someone who's healthy. When you choose courage instead of comfort, you're voting for confidence. And when you keep delaying the important things, you're voting for a future filled with more delay. You may think you're simply making today's decision, but today's decision is quietly creating tomorrow's identity. I remember hearing one of my mentors say something many years ago that completely changed the way I looked at success. He said, success isn't something you pursue. It's something you attract by the person you become. At first, I gotta be honest, it sounded like one of those inspirational quotes people put on the social media. But the longer I lived, the more I've realized how practical it really is. Because becoming someone different doesn't happen overnight. It happens one ordinary decision at a time. Now, here's something else that's fascinating. Your brain loves familiarity, not necessarily what's best for you, just what's familiar. Think about your drive home from work. How many times have you arrived home, barely remembering the journey? You weren't consciously thinking about every turn. Your subconscious had already learned the pattern. It simply repeated it. Life is full of those patterns. The way you react when someone criticizes you, the thoughts you have when you look at your bank account, the conversation you have with yourself when something goes wrong. Even when you walk into a room, much of it happens automatically, not because you've consciously chosen it today, but because you've repeated it yesterday and the other day before that and the day before that. The subconscious mind loves efficiency. Once it learns a pattern, it stops asking questions. It simply repeats the program. That's why changing your future isn't usually about trying harder. It's about interrupting the old pattern long enough for a better one to take its place. People often ask me, John, when does life finally change? My answer usually surprises them. Life changes the moment your ordinary day begins to look different. Not your holiday, not your birthday, not New Year's Day, your ordinary, say, Tuesday, because that's where your future is really being created. How you spend an ordinary Tuesday, for instance, repeated hundreds of times, will tell you far more about your future than the goals you've written on a piece of paper. Your future isn't hiding somewhere out there waiting for you. In many ways, you're already living it. Every morning, every afternoon, every evening. One ordinary day at a time. Here's another thought. People often overestimate what they can accomplish in a month, but underestimate what they can accomplish in 5 years. Why? Because we naturally look for dramatic progress. We want overnight transformation. We want the breakthrough, the big opportunity, the life-changing moment. But I believe nature doesn't work like that. An oak tree doesn't appear overnight. It grows quietly, almost invisibly, day after day, season after season. And then one day, people stand beneath its branches and admire its strength. What they don't see is the thousands of ordinary days that made it possible. Your life works exactly the same way. The person you've become 5 years from now is being shaped by decisions that hardly seem important today. Never underestimate a small decision, because small decisions, repeated consistently, become extraordinary lives. I'd like to ask you a few questions, not to answer me, but to answer honestly for yourself. Think about your average, say Thursday, as this usually gets posted on a Thursday, but it can be any day. Not your best day, not your worst day, just an ordinary day. How do you begin it? What fills your mind first? What are you feeding your thoughts? What are you listening to? What conversations are shaping your thinking? What habits have quietly become so normal that you've stopped noticing them? And finally, if you kept living tomorrow exactly the way you've lived yesterday, where would your life be in 5 years from now? Because that's a question worth sitting with. I'd like you to pause for just a moment. Don't think about where you want your life to be in 10 years. Think about tomorrow morning, because that's where your future really begins. Ask yourself, what is the one decision I can make tomorrow that makes my future self thank me for? Not a complete makeover, just one decision. It might mean getting up 30 minutes earlier, reading a book, making a phone call you've been avoiding, going for a walk, writing down goals, turning the television off for an hour earlier. Whatever it is, or maybe stop watching the darn negative news. Make it small enough that you can't talk yourself out of it. Because successful isn't built on occasional heroic effort. It's built on consistency, ordinary actions quietly becoming part of who you are. Here's something to reflect on this week. Take your journal or even a simple notebook and answer these questions honestly. What small decision do I keep making that's keeping me exactly where I am? Not somebody else's decision, yours, because that's where the power is. Next, what daily habit has generally served me well? Sometimes we're so focused on what needs fixing, we forget to acknowledge what's already working. Build on your strengths. Don't ignore them. Then ask yourself, what habit no longer belongs in the future I'm trying to create? Perhaps it's procrastination, negative self-talk, complaining, putting everyone else's dreams ahead of your own, or constantly waiting until you feel ready. Finally, complete this sentence 10 different ways. The person I am becoming would probably read more, listen more carefully, look after their health, save money, keep promises to themselves, take responsibility instead of making excuses. Continue writing until you have 10 answers. You might be surprised how clearly your future begins to reveal itself. Now, here's your challenge for this week. The next 7 days, I don't want you to try and change your entire life. In fact, I'd encourage you not to. Instead, choose just one daily action. Just one, that's all. Something so small that there's almost no excuse for not doing it. Read 10 pages, walk for 15 minutes, write 1 page in your journal, spend 5 minutes visualizing your future, practice gratitude before you go to sleep, make one simple phone call, drink more water. Whatever you choose, do it every single day. No negotiations, no excuses, no waiting until Monday. And here's what I'd love you to notice. Don't just watch for changes in your results, watch for changes in yourself. Because I'm going to tell you, after 7 days, the greatest transformation probably won't be what you've accomplished. It will be how you begin seeing yourself. Someone who follows through, someone who keeps promises, someone who can be trusted, especially by themselves. And that's where real confidence begins. You know, one day you'll look back on this season of your life. You probably won't remember every conversation. You won't remember every ordinary Thursday. But your life will reflect the decisions you made during those moments. The future you dream about doesn't suddenly arrive one magical morning. It quietly introduces itself, decision by decision, habit by habit, and day by day. And I personally find that incredibly encouraging, because it means your future isn't waiting for perfect circumstances. It isn't waiting until you have more money, more confidence, or more time, or even more experience. It's waiting for your next decision today. Perhaps that's what transformation really is. Not changing everything overnight, but making one better decision long enough until it becomes part of who you are. And when that happens, you won't just have different habits. You'll have become a different person. And different people create different lives. If today's masterclass at all resonated with you, I'd genuinely love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me what's one small decision you're committing to over the next 7 days. Not only will it help keep you accountable, but your commitment might encourage someone else who's reading the comments and to take the first step as well. If you're finding value in this masterclass series, please subscribe to the channel. Share this lesson with someone you care about, because you never know. One small decision, one conversation, or one video might be exactly what's needed to change the direction of someone else's life. Our next masterclass, we're going to explore another powerful influence that shapes our future. In the meantime, never underestimate the power of a small decision. Lives are built, families are strengthened, businesses are created, dreams are fulfilled because someone kept making the right decision, long after the excitement had faded. Remember, you don't become extraordinary because of what you do once. You become extraordinary because of what you choose consistently. So wherever you are today, take the next step, however small it may seem, because one small decision, repeated often enough, can completely change the direction of your life. Until next time, thank you for joining me for another edition of John Williams' Global Masterclass series. Keep growing, keep learning, keep becoming the person your future is waiting for. And remember, your best life isn't something you find, it's something you create. This is John Williams reminding you that your vision, your beliefs, and your emotions are shaping your future right now. Choose wisely, live abundantly, keep dreaming big, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.